In 1955, over 46 million Americans went to the movies every single week. Every single week, they paid their 25 cents, they found their seats, and they watched these faces, these impossibly beautiful, impossibly talented faces, and they believed, the way you can only believe when you're young and the lights go down, that those people would always be there. They weren't. 7 of the biggest stars of that golden, glittering era were gone before their time. Some shockingly young, some under circumstances that still don't add up, and one at an age so early that just saying the number out loud feels wrong. Welcome back. We're counting down today number 7 to number 1, and I need you to stay until the end, because the last 3 entries on this list are going to change how you think about Hollywood's golden years forever. Number 7. Carole Lombard, age at death 33, January 16, 1942. There is a version of Hollywood history where Carole Lombard becomes the greatest comedic actress of the 20th century, where she works through the 1940s and 1950s, continues to reinvent herself the way only the truly gifted can, and retires somewhere in the early 1960s as an undisputed legend. That version of history did not happen, and the version that did is one of the most heartbreaking stories in all of American cinema. Carole Lombard was, in the early 1940s, arguably the funniest woman alive. Not funny in the way that gets politely described as charming, genuinely, uproariously, brilliantly funny. She understood screwball comedy from the inside out, could hold her own with any co-star in any scene, and had a timing so precise it seemed almost supernatural. 20th Century, My Man Godfrey, Nothing Sacred, To Be or Not to Be, every film she touched crackled with a specific electricity that nobody else could generate. Directors adored her. Co-stars adored her. She was also, famously, the wife of Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood. Their marriage was one of the genuine love stories of the era, a real partnership between 2 enormous personalities who somehow made each other better. They had the ranch in Encino. They had the life that fan magazines dreamed about. And by all accounts, it wasn't an act. They were actually deeply happy. In January 1942, just weeks after Pearl Harbor, Lombard threw herself into the war effort, with the same fearless energy she brought to everything. She embarked on a war bond tour through her home state of Indiana and sold over $2 million in bonds in a single day, a staggering number. She was a one-woman patriotic force of nature. On January 16th, she boarded TWA Flight 3 to return to Los Angeles. The plane stopped in Las Vegas to refuel, and despite warnings about dangerous terrain ahead, the flight continued. Shortly after takeoff, the plane struck Mount Potosi in Nevada at nearly 8,000 feet. Everyone on board was killed instantly. Carole Lombard was 33 years old. Clark Gable had to be physically restrained from climbing the mountain himself to reach her. He was, by all accounts, never the same man afterward. She had finished To Be or Not to Be just weeks before she died, a film that features her at the absolute peak of her powers, sharp and luminous and alive in every single frame. Watching it today, knowing what's coming, is almost unbearable. That's what 33 looked like for Carole Lombard. Imagine what 53 would have been. Number 6. Jean Harlow, age at death, 26 June 7, 1937. Jean Harlow arrived in Hollywood like a lightning bolt, platinum blonde, impossibly beautiful, and possessed of a comic timing and screen magnetism that left everyone around her slightly stunned. She wasn't supposed to be funny. She was cast initially as pure eye candy, a decorative presence in the background of movies that needed a beautiful face. But every time the cameras rolled, something happened that nobody had planned for. Harlow was hilarious. She could do it all. The smoldering siren, the wisecracking dame, the surprisingly vulnerable romantic lead. By the time she was 25, she had starred opposite Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, Cary Grant, and William Powell, and held her own with every single one of them. Hell's Angels, Red Dust, Dinner at 8, Libeled Lady. The films came fast and they came good, and Harlow was the beating heart of all of them. Her personal life was a series of tragedies that would have broken a lesser person. Her first husband assaulted her on their wedding night. Her second husband, MGM producer Paul Byrne, died in an apparent suicide just months into their marriage under circumstances that were never fully explained and remain controversial to this day. She was 21 years old when that happened. A widow, a tabloid target, a young woman under an almost unimaginable amount of public pressure, and she still showed up to work and delivered performances that made audiences forget everything else. She was engaged to William Powell, one of the great loves of her life, when she began to feel ill in the spring of 1937. She had been complaining of fatigue and nausea, and those around her noticed she seemed off. For reasons that are still debated, some attributing it to her mother's Christian Science beliefs which discouraged medical treatment, others pointing to the demands of a brutal shooting schedule. She did not receive adequate medical attention until it was catastrophically late. She collapsed on the set of Saratoga in June 1937 and was rushed to the hospital. She had acute kidney failure, a condition that was almost certainly treatable had it been caught earlier. She died on June 7, 1937. She was 26 years old. MGM, unable to face recasting, completed Saratoga using a body double for the remaining scenes. You can see it happening, the camera angles suddenly avoiding her face, the double standing in long shots where Harlow should be. It is genuinely eerie, a ghost performance assembled from what was left. 26 years old, the platinum blonde, gone before most people's careers even begin. Number 5, James Dean, age at death, 24 September 30th, 1955. 3 films, that is the entirety of James Dean's filmography as a leading man. 3 films, one of which he didn't even live to see released. And yet, 3 films were enough to make him one of the most iconic figures in the history of American culture. Not just film history, cultural history. East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, Giant, 3 films made in roughly 18 months, all of them essential, all of them carrying within them something that felt genuinely new. Dean wasn't acting the way people acted in 1955. He was doing something rawer, more internal, more dangerously honest, bringing to the screen a quality of bruised, searching vulnerability that American cinema had never quite seen before. He made male sensitivity not just acceptable but magnetic. Every generation since has had its James Dean, the beautiful, difficult, searching young man who embodies whatever the current moment most needs, because Dean invented that archetype. He was born in Marion, Indiana in 1931, raised partly by an aunt and uncle after his mother died of cancer when he was 9. He studied at UCLA, made his way to New York, trained at the Actors Studio, that legendary institution where Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, and a generation of new American actors were rewriting the rules of the craft. Dean absorbed everything and developed it into something unmistakably his own. East of Eden made him a star. Rebel Without a Cause made him a symbol. Giant, filmed in the searing Texas heat, a sprawling epic in which Dean held his own opposite Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor for 3.5 hours, showed the world something new, that he was growing, that the raw, instinctive talent was developing into something even larger and more controlled. He was 24 years old and already becoming something rarer than a movie star. On September 30th, 1955, before Giant was even released, before he could know what the world was about to say about that performance, James Dean was killed when his Porsche 550 Spyder collided with another vehicle on a California highway near Cholame. He died at the scene. He was 24. Giant was released 2 months later, and audiences watching it knew, in a way that added an unbearable dimension to every scene, that the man on screen was already gone. His Academy Award nomination for that film was posthumous. So was the one for East of Eden. 3 films, 24 years, an influence that has never stopped reverberating. Some people fill their entire lives with less than James Dean put into 18 months. Number 4, Nick Adams, age at death, February 7th, 1968. Nick Adams is perhaps the least remembered name on this entire list. And that, in itself, is part of the tragedy. Because at one specific moment in the mid-1950s, Nick Adams was everywhere. He was the scrappy, electric, impossibly charming young actor who seemed to be on the verge of becoming one of the defining stars of his generation. The industry was watching him. His peers were watching him. The audience was watching him. And then somehow it all slipped away in the most heartbreaking and mysterious way imaginable. Born Nicholas Aloysius Adamshock in Nanticoke, Pennsylvania in 1931, Adams was the son of Lithuanian immigrants who had nothing to give him except the understanding that ambition was the only ladder available. He moved to Hollywood as a teenager, hustled relentlessly for work, and carved out a foothold through sheer force of personality. He was small, 5'7", wiry with an intensity in his eyes that the camera loved. He wasn't classically handsome in the Gregory Peck mold, but he had something rarer. He was watchable. Compulsively, completely watchable. His big break came through friendship. Nick Adams became one of James Dean's closest companions during the filming of Rebel Without a Cause in 1955, part of the tight inner circle that formed around Dean during that electric, doomed period. When Dean died in September 1955, Adams was one of the people who grieved most publicly and most genuinely. He spoke about Dean constantly, kept photographs, held onto the friendship like a talisman. Some in Hollywood whispered that he was trading on the connection. Others who knew him said the grief was completely real. What nobody could deny was that Adams had genuine talent of his own. He earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor for Twilight of Honor in 1963, a legal drama in which he played a small-town lawyer with a coiled, nervous energy that critics singled out as the best thing in the film. An Oscar nomination. That is not a small thing. That is the industry saying this person belongs at the highest level. He starred in his own television series, The Rebel, which ran for 2 seasons from 1959 to 1961, and made him a genuine household name. He wrote the show's theme song himself. He was, for those 2 years, exactly the kind of star he had always believed he could be. But the momentum never quite held. The film roles after the Oscar nomination were inconsistent. Some good, some beneath him, some deeply strange, including a Japanese monster movie, Frankenstein Conquers the World, that did his reputation no favors. The industry's attention drifted, the calls became less frequent, and Adams, who had built his entire identity around the dream of stardom, struggled badly with the gap between what he had imagined his career would be and what it actually was. On February 7, 1968, Nick Adams was found dead in his West Hollywood home. He was 36 years old, the same age as Marilyn Monroe when she died, a coincidence that feels almost too pointed to be accidental. The official cause of death was an accidental overdose of paraldehyde, a sedative, combined with other drugs found in his system. He had been under significant stress, going through a bitter divorce, dealing with financial difficulties, struggling with the slow fade of a career he had sacrificed everything to build. But as with several entries on this list, the official verdict has never sat entirely comfortably with everyone who knew him. The circumstances were unusual enough that friends and family questioned whether it was truly accidental. No definitive alternative explanation has ever emerged, but the questions have never entirely gone away either. Nick Adams died at 36, with an Oscar nomination on his resume and a television series that an entire generation remembered fondly, and somehow history has been unkind enough to nearly forget him entirely. He deserved better from the industry that used him up, and he deserved better from history than a footnote. Remember the name. He earned it. We are now in the final 3, and I promised you at the start that these would be different, that these would shake you. I meant every word of that. Number 3 was on the threshold of the greatest second act in Hollywood history, when everything stopped. Number 2 left behind a mystery so dark and so strange that people are still arguing about what really happened. And Number 1 gave their final performance knowing the end was near, and somehow made that knowledge into the most devastating piece of acting ever committed to film. Stay with me. Here we go. Number 3, Montgomery Clift. Age at death. 45 July 22, 1966. Montgomery Clift is one of the great tragedies of American acting. And the tragedy operates on 2 levels, the tragedy of what happened to him and the tragedy of what he might have become had it not. In the early 1950s, Clift stood alongside Marlon Brando and James Dean as one of the 3 men who reinvented screen acting for the modern age. He was the first, actually. The Search and Red River both appeared in 1948, years before Brando's A Streetcar Named Desire reached the screen. Clift had a fragility and an intellectual precision that was unlike anything audiences had seen, a face that registered thought and feeling simultaneously, a presence that drew your eye even when he was standing still, a place in the sun, from here to eternity, The Harris, great films, inhabited with a depth that was genuinely rare. He was gay at a time when that fact had to be hidden entirely, navigating the brutal closet of 1950s Hollywood while also battling severe addictions to alcohol and prescription pills that were, in part, a response to that hiding. The pressure was immense and relentless, and it left marks. Then, in May 1956, came what Elizabeth Taylor, his closest friend, called the longest suicide in Hollywood history. Clift was leaving a dinner party at Taylor's home in the Hollywood Hills when his car veered off the road and crashed into a telephone pole. He was nearly killed. His face was shattered, bones fractured, teeth knocked out, his nose broken, his jaw damaged. Taylor reportedly reached into his throat to pull out teeth that were lodged there and preventing him from breathing. She may have saved his life that night. The surgeries reconstructed his face, but the man who came back was changed. The addiction deepened. The pain was constant, and yet, and this is the part that breaks your heart, he kept working. Judgment at Nuremberg in 1961 earned him another Academy Award nomination. Freud in 1962 showed he still had greatness in him. He was cast in John Huston's The Man Story, and there were serious conversations about a full career revival when, on the morning of July 22, 1966, his companion found him dead in his New York home. He was 45. The official cause was occlusive coronary artery disease, likely accelerated by decades of substance abuse. 45 years old. The man who had invented modern film acting died in a New York bedroom, his enormous talent having spent the last decade fighting its way through pain just to reach the screen. Every performance he gave after 1956 was an act of extraordinary will. Remember that the next time you watch him. Number 2. George Reeves, age at death, 45, June 16, 1959. This is the one where the official verdict and the whispered truth have never completely agreed, and where decades later the question still hangs in the air unanswered. George Reeves was Superman. For an entire generation of American children in the 1950s, he was the Superman, the star of Adventures of Superman on television, the man in the cape who stood for truth, justice, and the American way in living rooms across the country. 6 days a week in syndication, kids didn't just watch him, they believed in him. He was one of the most recognized faces in America. Before Superman, Reeves had been a legitimate film actor with real promise. He appeared in Gone with the Wind, yes, that Gone with the Wind, in a small but memorable role. He had leading man looks, genuine presence, and the kind of easy authority on screen that directors love. He had aspirations toward a serious film career. And then Superman happened, and the role swallowed him whole. The typecasting was absolute and merciless. No studio would cast him in anything else. Every time his face appeared on screen, audiences, particularly children, saw Superman and the illusion broke. His attempts to build a film career beyond the cape were largely futile. He directed some episodes of the show to keep himself engaged creatively, but the frustration was real and well documented. He was a serious actor trapped inside an icon. On the night of June 15, 1959, just days before he was supposed to begin work on a new season of the show, and reportedly just before a planned marriage, George Reeves was found dead in his bedroom. He had been shot in the head with a Luger pistol. The official verdict was suicide, but almost nothing about the scene was consistent with suicide. The gun was found across the room from the body. There were no powder burns. 2 additional bullet holes were found in the floor. Witnesses present in the house that night gave inconsistent and bizarre statements. Reeves had been involved with the wife of a powerful MGM executive for many years, a relationship with genuinely dangerous entanglements. His mother refused to accept the suicide verdict until her dying day. Private investigators hired by his estate found enough inconsistencies to fill a book, and eventually, a film, Hollywoodland 2006, starring Ben Affleck as Reeves, explored the mystery without resolving it. The case was officially closed. Officially, it was suicide. But if you read the evidence carefully, you will understand why the people who loved George Reeves never accepted that answer. And you will understand why, to this day, his death remains one of the most troubling and unresolved stories in Hollywood history. Superman died at 45, and nobody, not really, knows why. Number 1. Marilyn Monroe. Age at death, 36, August 4th, 1962. How do you write about Marilyn Monroe? How do you find words adequate to the life, the loss, the legend, and still say something true that hasn't already been said 1,000 times? Maybe you start here. Marilyn Monroe was underneath everything, underneath the icon, the symbol, the tabloid target, the political controversy, the mythology. One of the most gifted comic actresses in the history of cinema. That is not hyperbole. Billy Wilder, who directed her in both The 7-Year Itch and Some Like It Hot, and who famously had a complicated experience working with her, said flatly that no one else could do what she did on screen. That what looked like instinct was actually something rarer and harder to name. She was born Norma Jean Mortensen in Los Angeles in 1926, into chaos and neglect. Her mother was institutionalized. Her father was absent. She spent years in foster homes and an orphanage before a marriage at 16 gave her a temporary escape. She was discovered while working in a factory, signed to a modeling contract, then to a studio contract, and spent years being told she was decorative but not talented, that she should smile and be quiet and be beautiful and not worry about the acting. She worried about the acting. She studied, she went to New York and trained at the actor's studio. She formed her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, in 1954, at a time when female stars simply did not do that. She fought the studio system for better roles, better directors, better material. She won more often than people remember. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, How to Marry a Millionaire, Bus Stop, The Prince and the Showgirl, Some Like It Hot, The Misfits. In each of these, she is doing something brilliant and specific and unrepeatable. Some Like It Hot in particular contains what many film historians consider one of the greatest comedic performances ever filmed. She was 32 when she made it. She was still growing. The Misfits, filmed in 1960, was her last completed film, written for her by her then-husband Arthur Miller, directed by John Huston, co-starring Clark Gable and Montgomery Clift. A gathering of damaged greatness, as it turned out, since Gable died within weeks of finishing it, and Clift was deep in his own spiral. Monroe is devastating in it. She plays a woman of extraordinary vulnerability and extraordinary perception, a woman who sees clearly and feels everything and is slowly being crushed by both. It is almost impossible to watch now without feeling that she knew something, that she was reaching across the screen and telling us something she couldn't say any other way. On August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Brentwood home. She was 36 years old. The official cause was acute barbiturate poisoning, an overdose. Whether it was accidental, suicide, or something more sinister has been debated for over 6 decades, and almost certainly will be debated for 6 more. What cannot be debated is this: she was 36. She had just been cast in a new film. She had given an interview weeks before her death, in which she spoke about the future with what appeared to be genuine hope, about the roles she wanted, the work she still planned to do. 36 years old, and the world had already put so much pressure on those 36 years that they had cracked and buckled in ways that should never have been anyone's responsibility to carry. The studios, the husbands, the government surveillance, the public hunger for her image, without any corresponding care for the person behind it. Marilyn Monroe was consumed by forces she couldn't entirely control, and the world took far more from her than it ever gave back. She deserved more time. She deserved better. And the fact that Some Like It Hot exists, that you can press play right now and watch her be fully, gloriously, heartbreakingly alive for a couple of hours, is one of the small mercies the universe occasionally provides. The greatest movie star who ever lived, gone at 36. 7 stars. 7 blazing lights that went out before their time, leaving behind films, images, and questions that the world is still sitting with, still trying to answer, still unable to fully accept. Carole Lombard, who was funnier than almost anyone and died on a mountain in Nevada doing something good. Jean Harlow, the platinum blonde, gone at 26 from something entirely preventable. James Dean, who made 3 films and somehow changed everything. Montgomery Clift, who survived the crash but spent a decade fighting his way back to his own greatness. George Reeves, who played the Man of Steel and died under circumstances nobody has ever fully explained. And Marilyn Always Marilyn, who deserved so much more than the world was willing to give her. If this video stayed with you, if it reminded you how fragile genius can be and how lucky we are to have these films at all, please share it. Like it. Leave a comment telling me which story hit you the hardest. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.